Karen called 911. When I refused garage access, she didn't know it was private property. There are moments when you see someone so convinced they're right, so drunk on entitlement, they call the police on you, while standing on your land in front of your garage that they just tried to break into. Yeah, that happened. And when the deputy arrived and asked whose name was on the deed, Karen's face did more damage than her crowbar ever could. Part 1. I've seen some bold things in my life. I've seen a raccoon square up with a Rottweiler. I've seen a guy try to tow a sheriff's cruiser out of spite. But I've never, and I mean never, seen someone call 911 on the actual owner of the land because they got denied access to a garage that wasn't theirs to begin with. Until Karen. And that's how this all started. With a woman, a lie, a phone call, and one locked door too many. Name's Aaron McKnight. I spent 20 years in the Army, 10 of those overseas, the rest bouncing between bases in the South and Midwest. Retired as a sergeant first class, packed it all in, and bought myself a little fixer-upper on the edge of Pine Bluff, Arkansas. 22 acres, one busted farmhouse, and an old workshop garage that hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint since Reagan was in office. I didn't mind the rust, or the wasps, or the overgrown fence lines. I needed quiet. I needed space. And most of all, I needed something no one could take from me. So I signed the deed in full, paid in cash, and posted private property. No trespassing signs every 20 feet from the front gate to the gravel drive. But signs don't mean much to people like Karen. I met her the second week after moving in. She showed up in a crisp, white Range Rover, matching tennis skirt and visor, sunglasses so big they looked like satellite dishes. I was elbow deep in a John Deere engine when she strutted up the drive like she owned the place. "You must be the new tenant," she said, all cheer and no sincerity. Karen Holloway. "I'm the acting liaison for the Ridge Heights HOA. I blinked. "The what now?" She pointed back toward the hills. "Our development sits just over the ridge. Ridge Heights. Charming homes. Very orderly. We're expanding the zone of aesthetic compliance to include outlying properties." "I'm not in a development," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "This is freehold land. Bought it from the Miller estate last fall." "Oh," she said, tilting her head like a confused chihuahua. "Well, we believe in proactive community guidance. So we do ask all non-member residents to observe Ridge Heights exterior codes." She handed me a paper laminated. Of course, it listed recommended garage paint shades and a preferred roof material index. I looked her dead in the eyes. "Ma'am, this ain't a cul-de-sac. This is a ranch." And I walked back into my barn. That was just the beginning. Karen came back every Friday for a month. Sometimes she just stood outside the gate, jotting notes on a clipboard. Other times she'd park at the end of my driveway and take pictures of my fence, my truck, the garage, the chicken coop, even my dog, Roscoe. She never asked permission, never knocked, just hovered. I put up more signs. She didn't see them. I closed my gate. She stepped over it. I finally posted a trail cam at the edge of my lot. That's how I caught her trying to peer inside the garage with a flashlight at 10:42 p.m. on a Wednesday. The garage in question wasn't anything fancy. Corrugated metal, 2 bays, busted skylight, but it meant something to me. Inside were my tools, my father's toolboxes, his hand-drawn plans from the 70s, my Harley, a cot where I'd sometimes crash when the house got too hot. It wasn't just a garage. It was memory, family, home. And on one humid morning in late July, I caught Karen standing right outside it, yanking on the handle like she was owed entry. I stepped out from the barn with a coffee and said, "You trying to break in?" She spun around, not the least bit embarrassed. "This structure is in violation of Ridge Heights Code, 4A unpainted surfaces visible from the road. I've filed multiple notices and received no reply. Because you've got no authority here. I've got every right to enforce compliance. This entire stretch will be converted to Ridge Heights Phase 3 before year's end. Your garage is a liability to regional property values." I pointed to the locked hasp. "You pull on that again, and we're going to have a real problem." She glared. "Then I'm calling the police." And she did. right there on my gravel. Part 2. I wish I could tell you I was nervous when she dialed 911. I wasn't. I just leaned on the porch rail and watched her bark into her phone like she was placing a custom coffee order. The sheriff's dispatcher knew me by name, and they sure as hell knew the address. Karen, on the other hand, kept referring to the place as Parcel 14B Ridge Heights, Sector 3. I nearly laughed out loud. Deputy Colin Braxton pulled up 15 minutes later. He's young, polite, and about as sharp as they come. Grew up around here. We talked once or twice at the hardware store. He stepped out of his cruiser, already sipping coffee, notepad in hand. Karen rushed to meet him like he was her Uber driver. Officer, thank God. I've reported this structure multiple times. It's non-compliant. It's not coded, and now he's physically threatening me when I attempt inspection. Colin nodded like he was listening. Inspection of what she pointed at my garage. This eyesore is under Ridge Heights jurisdiction. He refuses to comply. Colin turned to me. Aaron, you mind if I see your deed real quick? I had it laminated and posted inside my barn door, just in case this day ever came. I walked him over, and he read it. Then he looked back at Karen and said, this isn't Ridge Heights. This is unincorporated county property. He owns the land, the garage, the trees, the dirt, all of it. Karen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She tried a different tactic. The land is in transition. The HOA has development rights under phase extension zoning. Colin raised an eyebrow. You got documents to back that she reached into her purse like she was pulling a rabbit from a hat. Karen pulled out a stapled packet of papers with a Ridge Heights letterhead, a bunch of clipped maps, and a signature line signed Shelley Harmon, planning director. Now here's the thing. Shelley Harmon is a real person. She also happens to be my cousin, and she works at the county planning office. So I took a photo of the packet and texted it to Shelley. Less than 5 minutes later, she called me. None of that is real. She said, we've never authorized an HOA boundary extension, and that signature isn't mine. I passed the phone to Deputy Colin. He listened, nodded, frowned, and then asked Karen to sit in her car while he made some calls. The incident didn't stay quiet. By sunset, half the holler had heard about it. And turns out, Karen had been running the same song and dance on other folks too. Earl Jefferson, who owns the trout farm 2 lots over, got a compliance violation for keeping buckets visible from the road. A single mom up the ridge got fined $60 by mail for hanging laundry in view. 2 retirees, Dee and Mitch, were told they needed outbuilding renovation permits to replace the tin roof on their shed. None of them were in Ridge Heights. None of them had joined any HOA, and none of them had reported it because they were embarrassed or just didn't want the trouble. But now they were mad. With Shelley's help, I started looking into the documents Karen had handed to folks. Turns out, she'd filed a nonprofit in Little Rock under the name Ridge Heights Extended Vision Council, registered with a P.O. box and an out-of-state phone number. She'd created fake subdivision maps showing Sector 3 expanding across half the county. She used outdated zoning overlays, stripped water rights documents, and forged signatures of planners and notaries, some of whom had been dead for years. This wasn't a nosy neighbor. This was coordinated fraud. 2 days after the deputy visit, Karen came back. She had a clipboard, a body cam, and a man with her some wannabe security guard with a patch that said community enforcement in mirrored sunglasses like he thought he was in a movie. She marched up to my gate and shouted, "You are now under formal investigation for HOA noncompliance and obstruction of community review. Failure to comply will result in lien placement." I didn't say a word. I just hit the remote in my pocket. The gate rolled shut. She screamed. The next morning, she posted flyers all up and down the ridge. Warning new resident endangering Ridge Heights harmony. Report all activity. She stapled one to my mailbox. She didn't know I had cameras. Part 3. You ever feel a whole town lean back at once like it's been biting its tongue for too long, and suddenly it realizes it doesn't have to anymore? That was the sound of the ridge waking up. And Karen, she'd poked one bear too many. It was Earl's idea. He called me that Saturday morning. "We got to air this out in the open," he said. "Too many folks have been lied to for too long." So we booked the church rec hall. No microphones, no agenda. Just a pot of coffee, a bulletin board, and a folder full of Karen's greatest hits. We taped up her fake HOA notices, her forged zoning maps, her ridiculous violation citations. Martha brought a copy of the Ridge Heights community anthem Karen had emailed to residents and told them to learn before monthly assembly. She even printed it in cursive. We expected maybe a dozen people. 60 showed up. It started with Dee and Mitch, the retired couple. Karen had fined them for having reflective metal on their property. It was a windmill. Then came Alan, a retired postal worker. She threatened to report him for mailbox code deviation because he painted his box blue to honor veterans. A young mother stood up next and said Karen told her she wasn't allowed to plant sunflowers because they attract disruptive wildlife. By the time old Mr. Vargas rolled in on his motorized scooter, holding a photo of a citation Karen gave him for excessive lawn gnome activity, the room had gone from murmuring disbelief to full-on outrage. "This is fraud," someone said aloud. No one disagreed. Sheriff Braxton was in the back of the room, quiet until now. But when Karen's flyers were passed around, the ones stapled to gates and windshields accusing people of threatening the harmony of Ridge Heights Phase 3, he finally stood. "Folks," he said, "we've opened a formal investigation." That stopped the room cold. "She's being looked at for criminal impersonation, misuse of county seals, forgery, mail fraud, and harassment. If you've got paper, bring it to my office. If you've been scammed, file a report. No more whispers." He paused, then added, "Just because something's laminated doesn't make it law." Raina called me that night. She'd been digging deeper into Karen's nonprofit registration, and she found something big. She's been using HOA scare tactics to funnel people into fake arbitration settlements, Raina said. "Got a buddy in legal, he tracked down 2 settlements she filed. She made people sign NDAs and pay her to resolve disputes that weren't real. How much are we talking? Thousands." And the kicker, she added, she tried to register a consulting company last week, Karen's Community Integrity Group. "Guess what the acronym is? KCIG, I said. "Karen's kick in the gut." Close enough. We both laughed, but not for long, because the fire was coming. The very next morning, Karen rolled through town with a bullhorn. No joke. She drove the Range Rover through Ridge Street at 9:30 a.m., shouting through a megaphone, "These lies are orchestrated. I am the lawful coordinator of Ridge Heights. Expanded trust. Do not let false landowners corrupt our community." She tossed flyers from her window like confetti. That afternoon, she tried to hold a counterforum in the gazebo by Ridge Creek Park. Only 2 people showed up. Both left after 20 minutes when she started accusing them of being plants. And then, finally, the letter dropped. Signed by the Arkansas Department of Real Estate Development and Community Planning, Karen Holloway is hereby ordered to cease all operations under any residential planning, oversight, or enforcement capacity, formal or informal, effective immediately. Her nonprofit was dissolved, her personal liability exposed, and the sheriff served her with a formal notice of civil claims pending review. She tried to scream about conspiracies and government overreach, but this time nobody listened. Part 4. Karen didn't go down in handcuffs. There was no dramatic arrest, no viral mugshot, no news chopper circling over a gated community. But sometimes the most satisfying justice isn't loud. It's slow, quiet, final. And when it finally came for her, it wasn't just karma knocking. It was everyone she lied to knocking at once. Over the course of 6 weeks, the Ridge Heights Expanded Trust was formally dissolved by the state. The Secretary of State's office issued a public advisory warning rural residents against fake HOAs. Karen was fined $18,500 for document forgery, unauthorized land use claims, and fraudulent arbitration. 3 separate neighbors took her to civil court and won restitution. Her consultancy application was rejected with prejudice. The Range Rover disappeared from town not long after that. Rumor had it she moved in with her sister in Missouri. Others say she's trying to launch a YouTube channel about neighborhood sovereignty. No one subscribed. We didn't let her legacy rot in silence, we replaced it. By the time fall rolled around, a few of us got together and drafted a real community charter, not an HOA, not a dictatorship, just an agreement. We called it the Open Land Code of Courtesy. It had 5 bullet points: respect private land, no enforcing what you don't own, knock before you complain, help your neighbor fix a fence before you criticize it. If you can't live with others, live farther. No signatures needed, just handshakes. No fines, just shared effort. It wasn't law, but it felt like home. The garage Karen tried to break into, I painted it navy blue, hung a flag above the door, fixed the roof with my own hands, even built a little deck out back where I sit with a glass of iced tea and my dog Roscoe curled at my feet. And I left one thing hanging above the entrance, a laminated copy of the county order dissolving Karen's HOA, next to the private property. No trespassing sign. It's faded now, but it stands as a reminder, not to Karen, to me. Sheriff Braxton stopped by a month later. He leaned on my porch rail, sipping my coffee, and said, "You know what did her an entitlement, I guessed?" He chuckled. "No. She underestimated one thing." "What's that?" He grinned. "People don't stay silent forever. Karen thought authority was something you could fake, something you could laminate, staple, and shout loud enough that folks would believe it. But real authority that comes from trust, from fairness, from service, it doesn't come from scaring a single mom over a flower bed or yelling codes through a bullhorn. And it sure as hell doesn't come from trying to break into a man's garage and claiming you own the view. Your turn, speak up. Have you ever been pushed by someone who didn't really have the right, ever been told to follow rules that didn't make sense or weren't even real? Tell your story. Call it out. Expose the fake power before it grows. Because sometimes the most dangerous lies don't come from politicians or headlines. They come from the clipboard at your doorstep, and if no one says no, then the next garage they break into might be yours. End.